welcome everybody to our first webinar here. We are starting on our own convention, which is pretty exciting. So today we're going to be going over building next generation virtual events in higher education. So this is going to be like a two-part webinar. We have another one going on the same time next week. So if you guys want to join that, we're going to be talking a little bit more technology specific next gen events. So you could use that same link that you used to join this event. But today we're going to be going over virtual and hybrid events, how we kind of see that as the next gen events, how we see that shaping the future of events in general. So as you can see, I have a couple of my colleagues here who are going to be acting as some panelists who are going to be taking each side of virtual and hybrid event. So I'll introduce them more in just a second. But first, I just want to go through the agenda for today. So first off, like I said, I'll introduce you to Matt and James over here in just a minute. But first off, we're going to go over events in general. Obviously, they've changed a ton over the past year, as everyone on this call knows. So we'll try to summarize that the best we can in a concise way. And then we're going to go over virtual events. We don't see them going anywhere post-pandemic, when people are back at campus, in person, all that. We still think there's going to be a need for virtual events. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we'll talk about hybrid events. So we kind of go over what that is, how it can be executed properly, some use cases we've seen, some really cool stuff in hybrid events too. And then kind of to wrap that all up, we're going to talk about the future of events in general. Like I said, you guys know the changing landscape here. So there's a lot to cover in this 30-minute session, but we'll try to keep it brief and leave you guys with some good information, maybe some inspiration you could use for your own events going forward. And then to cap that off, we're going to open the floor to any questions you guys may have. So if you have any questions, feel free to just throw them into the chat here and we will answer as many of them as we can get to today. So without further ado, let's bring in the panelists here. So we'll have Matt Klingbeil, who's the Director of Marketing, sort of talk about virtual events, I think mostly. So Matt, you want to introduce yourself here?
Sure. So I'm Matt Klingbeil. I'm the Director of Marketing at VisitDays. As a marketer, I love virtual events. I think they're fantastic. I think they really open up a lot of doors for all of us to interact with new audiences, engage with new people in different ways. I'm really thrilled to talk about virtual and hybrid events today with you all.
Awesome. And now we have James Walton, who's going to be talking more about hybrid events. He's the head of partnerships here at VisitDays. How you doing, James?
Hey, Chris. Hey, Matt. Excited to be here, head of partnerships, and I get to speak with all of our users, all of our partners, all across the country, all across the world. My alma mater is here today, so I will try to do you proud, but super excited. Great to see you all here. This is just the first of many types of events like this as we build out our community of just all of us in higher ed, what's going on, what's changing, what's new. So we're going to start to dive in today and super excited to see where all this goes with you all.
Yeah, awesome. And I should mention, I'm Chris Lango, I'm the product marketing manager. I may have forgotten to introduce myself at the beginning. So let's kick this thing off. I think Matt is going to talk first here.
Sure. So to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, events have forever changed in higher ed and really across the board. We've all experienced this in the past year. I think back to a year ago when we really first got hit with COVID and the pandemic. I remember being in our office in Midtown Manhattan with James and Stu, our CEO, and talking about what's this going to do for higher education? What's it going to do for events? And you know, what is this really going to mean? What is virtual actually going to mean? And in the past year, let's really think about what we've done in the past year. We've spent more time on virtual meetings than we want to admit. We wake up in the morning in our house or an apartment, we jump on Zoom, we jump on Teams or WebEx, whatever. We are in virtual events all day, every day. But it doesn't mean we have to be tired of them, or it doesn't mean we have to say, you know, this is awful. It's become a part of our routine, and we can own that, and we can make it even better. We've also realized that over the last year, people are more open to a Zoom meeting than there are a phone call, right? If you really think about it, there is something more personal about seeing who you're talking to. You get to have this familiar interaction that you might have had in your office, you might have had during your campus tour or your alumni mixer, during your orientations. Now you could do those, you could keep those going, but keep those going in a virtual space. We've also learned about virtual high fives. We've learned about Zoom bombings. We've learned about virtual happy hours, virtual everything else. Virtual has been an interesting experience. I've done family reunions that were virtual this year that I never would have probably done before, because it's so easy to bring people together in this space and to think creatively about it. And then the most obvious thing we can talk about is the unprecedented changes in higher ed from events. We've gone through a full cycle now, essentially, of having to move admitted student events online, moving open houses online, thinking about orientations online, graduations, alumni events. The list goes on and on and on. And I'll be honest, we've all done a good job, and we keep doing a good job because we keep thinking about how do we make this better, how do we make this smarter, and that's really what we're going to talk about here in virtual and these hybrid events. So not to be the downer, but virtual events aren't going anywhere. We talk to a lot of customers, talk to a lot of the higher education market every day. And if I have 10 calls, I'd say 8 of 10 people are saying virtual is not going anywhere. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And here's the question I want to pose, and here's the reason why I would say that. If students are able to join an event or join an experience from anywhere and at any time, why force them to join another way? And that means as an alumni, that means as a prospective student, an admitted student, current student, it becomes a lot easier to access a virtual event and to not have to go somewhere in person at times. It does create sometimes a little bit more work on our part to really engage with people. But at the end of the day, if I'm a student, if I'm an alum, which I am of a couple of different institutions, if I can just join an event from my iPhone while I'm on the way somewhere else, perhaps, or from my couch while I'm walking my dog, then I think I have a much better likelihood of joining today after all the experience we've had in the past year. The key is really to maximize that virtual engagement. And that's really what I'm going to get at over the next couple of minutes.
Matt, remember in the old days, we used to see someone join a Zoom and they would be in their car. You're like, no, you can't do that. You can't. But now it's every day. It's every day you're outside walking and someone's joining a Zoom. And we've become accustomed to that. We know that, hey, go with the flow. They're in, they're attentive. It's just a different environment now.
Different environment. The expectation has fundamentally shifted, where I don't want to be told I have to be in person somewhere at 10 a.m. I want to know I can roll out of bed at 9:50, get my phone together, and then join my event, whatever that event might be. Absolutely. So despite the fatigue we probably all feel, and I know we all feel some sort of fatigue, the benefits of virtual events are really tremendous for both your team and your various audiences. Virtual has become the default. Our audiences are first thinking when you send a calendar invite, you send an invite to a webinar or to some sort of event, their default is what link do I register at and what link do I join with? It's not so much, okay, let me get my Uber or let me get on the train or let me get on my car and go somewhere. It's really, I know I'm going to click a link and I'm going to be able to join this right away. Again, anytime, anywhere, convenience of virtual events. People know how to use Zoom and people must know how to use Zoom, and we're really all there. And when we say Zoom, Zoom is really that verb, right? It's that we're Googling something, we're Zooming something. That's just a catch-all now for all virtual in a certain sense. We're all there, we know how to use it. I would go as far as to say you all easily join this event today using our platform in Zoom, which shows the ease of joining an event at that point and to really have this access. Honestly, virtual is easier to attend. It creates more access and it's absolutely cheaper, which is a huge, huge benefit, especially in higher education. We're all in this together. We all know budget crunches. We know everything else that's going on. So if you're able to bring in a couple of hundred or a couple thousand students, whether they're alum or prospective or current again, that's a huge benefit of the virtual. Maybe we are saving the environment by using virtual. We used to travel a lot, and we all used to travel a lot. Recruitment is on the road constantly. James and myself would travel to a lot of different conferences on a monthly basis. We don't have to do that right now, but we're still creating the engagement. We're still creating the connections that we want with our prospective students, customers, and everything else in between. The biggest point that I drive home constantly when I talk about the benefits of virtual events and really where this future is going to keep taking us is that in our own platform, in our own world of visit days, 70% of attendees of our virtual events in the past year have joined from a smartphone. That is a real point of pride that I have, and we all have in this, because it's showing that I can just pick up my phone and I can just join. I no longer have to be behind a computer screen. It really takes the thought out of how do I get somewhere and what do I do? And the joke of I'm in two places at once. Like I can really multitask like I never have before.
Yeah, Matt, I do want to bring up, I was looking at something online and you mentioned the ease of using Zoom. I think the last few months, or for the last almost year now, there has been sort of a learning curve that we've all had to get over to introduce Zoom to your meetings, to your campus events and things like that. So I would definitely say that it's gotten a lot easier over the past few months now that
Right.
the whole world basically had to adjust to this virtual world. So it is, kind of just commonplace now, which is interesting to think about.
Yeah. So how do we maximize engagement, right? That's the question that's on all of our minds all the time. And this is where I'm going to talk about this virtual engagement, these next gen kind of ideas of engagement from a virtual standpoint. One of the key ways to maximize engagement in a virtual setting is to get your whole community involved. I'll run two examples at you. So you're running your admissions events, you're running your open house, or your admitted student event, which is what we're all thinking about right now still. You usually have your whole campus involved. You have everyone in the auditorium, in the quad, in the student center, wherever. That same idea really should be replicated in a lot of ways virtually. So getting your whole community involved creates this tremendous engagement opportunity for all of your admitted students. They can join an event, they can easily see every piece of your campus right in front of them on their screen. They could talk to Professor Chris from the communication department, and then they could talk to financial aid, and then they can chat with someone from housing to understand how do I live on campus and what does it actually look like in the fall. So they can get all these different questions answered while also interacting with current students, former students, and their soon to be cohort as well, all by getting everyone in this community involved at one real virtual central spot. Meeting your audience where they already are. If we think about our prospective audiences, where are they mostly living? Where are we mostly living? We're mostly living on our smartphones. We're mostly living in really interesting kind of niche areas of the internet. We can meet them where they are. We can make sure that wherever they're coming from, they can interact with us right away, and really always understand that they can meet us anytime, anywhere, really 24/7. Our whole philosophy is that you should be able to interact with your students, whether it's in person, virtually, in this sense of a virtual kind of in-person event, or just let something run for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let them interact with you on their own time at that point. And think about what your prospective students, your current students, your alumni, what do they really want from your team? I go to a lot of alumni events, and I'm always thinking, how do I interact with my roommate from college who now lives somewhere else? Or how do I interact with this different department I was involved with in college at that point? It's become a lot easier in the past year. So I'm not so much worried about leaving work, running to a happy hour, getting on the subway after work, or going wherever. I can spend a couple hours with the people I haven't seen in maybe a decade, and I can kind of enjoy that experience and make a donation, join an event, and do whatever. Your current and prospective students are really feeling the same way at that point. They just want to understand that you know what they want, and they just want you to give it to them. They don't want to guess about it anymore.
I'll take over from here.
Sure.
I was just thinking about so much you said, Matt, about virtual events, and I always like to point out how far we've all come. Matt just set the stage for virtual events and everything we've seen in the past year. But if you all think about it, think about a year ago. You got that email or that phone call that said, stay home, don't come to the office. We're locked down. And you're thinking, do I have food? Do I have toilet paper in my house? Do I have enough toilet paper? When am I going to go back to the store? And then the first time you use Zoom, a lot of us use Zoom before that, but do you remember the first time you used Zoom? You pull it up on your screen and you're super attentive. You don't know that if anybody can see if I pull up another window or if I'm looking at my text messages or my email. But now we're accustomed to it, right? All of us here probably have a bunch of different windows open, checking email, texting, talking on the phone. It's a usual thing now. And the reason that's so important to call out is that's how far we've come in just a year, right? A forced year of doing things virtual. But it's also a point to say, let's pause for a second, because yes, we're doing all things virtual. There's virtual events happening around us all day. I was in a whiskey tasting last night I'm doing, just like Matt said, reunions with my family, going to virtual weddings. It's just a usual daily occurrence now. But I say pause because you're all probably thinking, wait, wait, wait. There's light at the end of the tunnel, right? Vaccinations are on the rise. In most states, the COVID cases are down. There is a point where we're going to get back to something else that's next normal, something else that's going to start to bring back some of the things we used to do in person. And then we're going to have some other auxiliary things that might still be virtual, and then anything in between. And that's why we thought it was so important to do this session with you all today, because we're in the thick of it every day. We're in the weeds with our higher ed partners every day, talking through these problems, these challenges. We've all become really good at plan B planning. That's what I call it, is that we've all gotten burnt in the past year. We've all had events that got canceled, and we said, screw it, let's go to build it out differently the next time. But after that, we're like, no, every plan we do, every event has a plan B. And we've got really good at planning those, because at a moment's notice, yep, it's not happening. Cool, we've got everything set up. In the old days, it was just the rain delay alternative, go under the shelter. So now we've become so much more advanced in technology, all of us, with all the different tool sets we use every day and everything that we do. And we're all planners. We're all planners that are planning our own personal events, our own personal health events, our family events, professional events, of course. So it's just so important to I think, call that out for us. There's still a lot of uncertainty. We still know that people are thinking about doing in-person commencement, in-person orientation. And quite honestly, a lot of us don't know. Well, that's why we're hearing, hey, there's a plan B. The plan B is virtual. But our commencement's going to be driving in cars, kind of separated over the course of 3 days. And so there's still a lot of uncertainty. We see light at the end of the tunnel, but there's so much uncertainty. So when we start talking about building next gen virtual events for higher education, it's so important to think about, okay, what are all those things that happened, and what can we take those lessons that we've learned and start to apply those in new ways that give even a better experience than those students or constituents, alumni, have ever really seen before. And that's really the sole focus of today. So I'm so excited that we're here. Health and safety are still primary concerns, but students are still mixed in what they want. I have a report fresh off the press. It was a campus in California at a 4-year university, and they used a chatbot on their website to ask a series of survey questions, essentially. And the point of asking that was to get every student to answer a few questions, but the key one was, for coursework, for classes, what do you prefer in the fall? And this just happened. This is very recent. And they gave 5 different options. The first was, more in-person class time is better. I like most of my classes to be on campus some of the time, at least every week or two. The second option was, I'd like to come to campus for in-person classes a few times during the semester, maybe once a month. The third was, I don't want to come to campus for classes at all if I can avoid it. The fourth was a mix of in-person and online, as long as there are places for me to study on campus, maybe in between. And then the fifth was a mix of those is okay if I can optimize my schedule to keep the online courses on one set of days and the in-person on a different set. And when they got all the results back, it's fascinating. They put them in 3 buckets. Do you want in-person, do you want virtual, or do you want a mix? And it was 33%, almost exactly on each one of those. That brings up now 20 more questions about, okay, we've got a whole new problem and opportunity on our hands. And when we start talking about virtual events, hybrid events, going back to a next normal, we need to be thinking about those events differently. We need to be thinking about our audiences a little bit differently. And that's what we're going to start to tackle in today. Chris, if you can go to the next. So hybrid events are not something that we will ever define. I don't think it's something that you would define either. These could be a lot of different things. And most of the time, it just means that there's different audiences on different formats, different mediums, but coming together for one singular event. I think about when I was a child 30 years ago, and I used to see on the Discovery Channel, you have this classroom in China that had a video and a TV that was connected to a classroom in America. And to them, they were actually talking, conversing, translating. And if you put yourself in that seat, yes, you're sitting in a room with your peers and you're looking at a screen, but if you really focus in, you are all in the same room. You feel like at that event, you are collectively in one place at the same time. That's what comes to my mind every time I hear hybrid events. And now it's gone exponentially from there. We can start talking about drones. We can start talking about big audiences, driving around and people watching online. But hybrid events is just the cusp. It's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what new normals are going to be, in terms of how are we engaging all of our audiences at scale at a high level of quality. So that's where this idea of hybrid events is just going to start to morph and evolve. And so it's super exciting for us. I think it's super exciting for you all as well. I think this summer and then the next academic year will be super exciting. This idea of choice and control comes up. Depending on the event that you're running, we're going to start to talk about event design in a moment. Are you going to give choice to those audiences? Are you going to say, okay, well, if you want to do a mix, we'll let you do that. But if you want to do virtual, we'll let you do. Or is it more control? If you've got a big brand and hey, we've got tons of demand for what we offer, I can just pick one and say, hey, it's virtual. You're either there or you're not. And so now, event by event on a case by case basis, we're gonna be having those conversations. What do we offer those? And then how much control do we really want to have so that we get the maximum engagement out of those audiences? Is it avoidable? Is some campuses right now, some colleges, universities are mandating vaccines. It is happening. And what happens if a large number of students say, no, I'm not getting the vaccine. You've got my tuition money. What are you going to do? Is it avoidable? Are hybrid events avoidable? And that's going to be another conversation that comes up within this. If your job is an event planner, a marketer, an admissions recruiter, an alumni coordinator, your job is to really run those events to get as many people to show up, to have a great time, engage with each other, leave with something, right? But if we now start to have all these floating audiences, now we're going to have to start to think differently about how we're maximizing each of those for singular events. And then, do you need a professional tech setup? We get that question a lot. Do you need a sound stage, drones and helicopters and audio? Well, not necessarily. We had one of our partners that had an alumni who was a musician, and they performed during a live student yield event on our platform. And so it was great, but it had to look good. The musician's reputation is always on the line, so they had to make sure that it was HD audio, it was just storyboarded really well. You just have to do those things now. And that's that new world that we live in. Content is king. If we have bad content, they're not going to come back. Even this session that you're in now, if this is bad content, you probably won't come back to the one next week where we're going to be showcasing a lot of these technologies. So you really have to think through who's the audience, where you're trying to build those pathways for them. So that's what we mean about next generation of virtual events. When you signed up for it, you're probably thinking, what is the next gen virtual events? That's what we're talking about. On the next slide, we're going to talk about event design. We talk to our partners every day about event design. And we say, look, there's a lot of things happening. There's virtual events, in-person events, there's all sorts of things. But singularly, start at the beginning. Start with event design. It's always the very first thing you have to do, which is what are the outcomes I'm looking to get out of this event? And then we've been saying, what are your audiences? We used to say, who are your audiences? Now it's, what are your audiences? What are your audiences? Well, I've got a virtual audience. I've got an in-person. I've got a mix. I probably have a fourth one somewhere. Versus who in terms of roles, what are you trying to accomplish? Because now it's much more complex than that. You're now thinking about scattering things out. And instead of doing a one day, one time, you're scattering it out. Just like us, we could have tried to take an hour on your schedule, but nobody wants to sit in a Zoom for an hour. So we set it up to say, hey, we're going to journey this out. Today, let's build a foundation. Let's plant the seed. Let's get to know each other and build a relationship. And then next week, let's show you some really cool stuff that's going on that really excites you, that you can put into place, right away. What's the flow and format? Can you get people to easily find you, whether you're outbound marketing, your ads, your SEO? Can they get those eyeballs to your website? Can you get them registered easily? Then can you get the reminders and notifications set up so they, just like you guys all got, to get them to show up? And then can you actually put on, a really awesome event, high quality production, and then afterwards get them a survey, and then actually start to build out another flow to get them to the call to action. In some cases, it's to give $1 if it's alumni, or in admissions, it's to put in an application. But now, again, those flows in that format are all part of this event design package. What tools are out there? So when I mentioned that flow, do you have MailChimp? Do you have Bronte? Do you have different services that you're using for email outbound to grab people? And then do you have all the different guts in the middle, like chat bots and surveys and things to get them out to a CRM eventually? What does that flow look like? And do you know all those tools that are out there? We find new tools every day. In this virtual world, every day we probably find like a dozen new tools every day that we're sharing. And it's like, okay, this is cool, but I'm not going to get to it today. I'm going to look at it tomorrow and see if it fits what we're doing. That's the
and that's the fatigue factor in a lot of ways too, is we see so many tools, and as marketers, as enrollment folks, alumni folks, we always want the best tool for everything, because we know it's our content that's going to be really king at that point, but we want to know we're using the best tools to make our content really shine. And at a certain point, it can become overwhelming. Well, the three of us, but we always talk about how do we boil it down to its true essence, and really make sure it's just, if you think it's going to help you engage with your audience better, then that's the right tool for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cohesion is a part of this as well. Event design cohesion. What does that mean? That means if one of you set up an event and you've got Matt coming in person because that's what he wants to do, and then you've got Chris joining virtually, they're going to be some part of the same event, right? There might be a screen with some cameras, and that's how Chris is joining, however you do it. But cohesion is do they each feel that the other person is in the room? It's easy to say, hey, the in-person, you're going to get an awesome experience, and everyone virtually, whatever. But for Chris, he needs that same experience. He needs to feel like he's in the room with Matt, and vice versa. And that also has a lot to do with benefits. If the benefits that Matt gets when he walks away is greater than what Chris got, that's not a successful event in our minds. Our minds is that, hey, they walk away with both really, really great benefits. They just happen to come in differently because they had to, or whatever the reason was. But they both were able to access that same level of benefits, that information, those relationships, that FaceTime. Nothing will replace when Matt meets a person and they just click. Can you do that with Chris the same way? So benefits is so important as well. On the next slide, when we are now laying the foundation, we've talked about virtual events, talked about next gen events now and hybrid. We keep asking ourselves, are hybrid events really the next gen virtual events? And we do think that is the case. We do think that's the evolution of where things are going. So the tips that we always give, start with event design. Think about the concept of dragging people. Dragging people means I meet Matt at an in-person event. We have a great conversation. I'm like, oh, you need to meet my friend Chris. I grab Matt by their arm, drag him over to Chris, introduce them, and back off. You can't do that in a virtual setting really well. We have not found a way. But if you keep that mentality, how can I get as close to that as possible? That's what you want. What are the tools? What are the techniques that you can do that sort of human-to-human interaction? That is super key. We always say, think about that. Think about how you can get closer and closer to that. Build your tool set. Again, we'll share some things next week if you join, but build your tool set. Make sure you're using tools that really work and that are compatible with everything else. Think beyond. Think beyond events to experiences. Even today, we could easily send out a Zoom link, you join, and then you leave, and that's it. We're thinking about, hey, how do I capture that audience so they're part of something? We're all tribal in nature as humans, right? We all want to be part of something. We all want to be part of a community. So after this event, this recording is going to go up live. You can go back and watch it. You can share it with your colleagues. And then the next event, hopefully you bring some other friends as well. If you all want to host an event like this on our platform, you can do that. And you can create that own audience and share those best practices. So that's kind of the other evolution. Think about community. It's easy to bring somebody to a Zoom link, see you later, we analyze who came, but it's better to keep them somewhere where now they live, they thrive, they're meeting other people. That is key. That is super key for us. And I always ask, think about the last year. So the last year, pandemic, how many communities did you join? I had to think about it myself, and it's a lot. And you don't think about it that way. You're like, yeah, I'm kind of joining these things, but I'm actually part of that community now. I'm actually contributing. I've actually made friends in those communities, all virtually. And it's super important because that's how your audiences will be able to organically grow with each other versus just one-to-many approach of you feeding them information. And so that was our story today. I'm just super thankful that you all joined and you've been able to hear kind of where we've come. We've been in this fight with you all, and we've been able to see so many different things, so many success stories, but also so many more challenges to come. And so we always say this is the cusp. This is the very beginning of where we're going. And we just cannot wait to share that journey with you all. So I'll stop here. And I know we have some questions that Chris teed up and any other questions that came in.
Yeah. Thank you guys both for going through that. That was super helpful for me too. Learned something. But there is some questions in terms of virtual and hybrid events that I think you guys could maybe answer, and we could get some clarity on that. So something that I found was Matt, you touched on this a little bit, but how can you substitute the in-person connection when you host virtual events only?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing it right now in a lot of ways. I think we are providing this interesting personal connection with all the people in this session right now. You're seeing me, you have my name, you know who I am. I think half the battle, no matter where it is, in person, virtual, hybrid experiences, when you put a face to that name and you know they're a real person, you get a feel of their personality a little bit. I don't think it's ever, I think that's the way that we have to think about it. It's not one's replacing the other, one's better than the other. It's just, what's that interaction actually look like? And what do you actually want in your interactions? I think about that a lot, and because everything is just virtual right now. And that's what I come down to. It's not that there's one thing's replacing the other. They are going to be different, but there are benefits. I just think about the 18-year-old college student. I think about myself when I was 18. I was awkward and I didn't want to go to open houses or go up to the current students or go up to the faculty at my alma mater. Virtually, it's a lot easier. That barrier is a lot less. So I can easily have this live chat in a virtual setting. I can have this one-on-one interaction from my living room. The barrier is a little less, the stress level is a little less, and I'm more likely to actually interact with that person.
I couldn't agree more. I think we look back pre-pandemic and we look at some of our partners, and there's not a single institution that said, "Hey, we got it. Everything's great. We've got tons of enrollment coming through the door. Funding is great. Donations are great. Everything's good." Everyone has things that keep them up at night, and obviously more so. And something you said earlier, Matt, about meeting them where they are, your audience, students, parents, alumni, even your employees, staff, and faculty. Meeting them where they are is just so critical. We have to do that. We all have to do that because that's where they are. And taking the time to go find them and corral them into other types of mandated flows can actually be quite daunting as well. And we've kind of seen that already to some degree.
Yeah, definitely. James, maybe you could tackle this one. It's a question about hybrid events. So it says it can be costly and time consuming to host a hybrid event. How can you justify this for a smaller team with less resources?
Yeah, and that kind of segues into a poll question as well about one of the biggest reasons difficulty to execute hybrid events. Yeah, I mean it's complicated. We've been all given a lot of things on our plate the last year, more than before. At the same time, we have our own jobs to do, maybe 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. It's pretty typical of higher ed. I spent 10 years working at Ohio State actually, and then many more in other places. So I know it's a lot to ask. And so on top of that, hey, now you have to do all these other things because we have these 3 audiences and we have to do things at a high quality level. It does become really, really tough. And one of our mission and our goals is to really bridge that gap with you all and bridge that in the higher level conversation in higher ed. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. If you said, well, one of the best use cases we have is campus tours. So for anybody, not just for prospects, but for anybody who wants to do a campus tour. So let's say you used to do that in person. You register somewhere, you show up in person, and then you go. And then, if we talk hybrid, now you're trying to simulcast that to somebody else. And so technically, the easy way is you get your phone and the person running it just has a phone logged into Zoom. There's a hybrid event. You have people on Zoom watching what you're showing, and you can pause every few moments and take a question from that virtual audience. It's as simple as that. And if you wanted to go really deep and do a really highly produced hybrid event, we can get there. We're all going to get there eventually. If you think about the tools that we're talking about, they become so much easier and so much more compatible over the last year. It's going to get easier and easier over time. Even on our platform, we've excelled in in-person events for 8 years before virtual. And so obviously it's the natural iteration for us to say, yeah, like hybrid, we've already been doing it. So you can easily have mixed audiences, and we're going to take care of making sure everybody shows up to the right place at the right time. But then when the lights go on, you guys can still focus on having these really awesome content in your events. And that's what we really want. I think that's the focus. So what tools, what technology do you put into place to help bridge those gaps so that you all can still do what you do best, which is talking when the lights go on?
There were 2 questions that came in through the chat. I just want to touch on those. We have about 10 minutes left. One I answered, and I'll go through that. And then there's a really interesting question about gamification also, which is something we talk a lot about. So one question was, how do you work with staff that are not tech savvy, tech comfortable, or don't understand why we can't just do it like we used to? And that's a great question. That's a question we all get a lot, or we've all experienced. And for us as a company, and for us as just kind of the way we think is, you have to have the resources to make them comfortable. One, when you're used to just showing up someplace on Saturday morning, it's a lot different than having to go to a link and clicking a link and signing in. So for us, it's about those resources, right? It's about the videos, the blogs, the kind of one-to-many, one-to-one interactions to make sure that every user is very comfortable with virtual and hybrid events. I think back to another lifetime ago, I worked in the Apple store, and I would train people on how to use an iPhone or a laptop. And the amount of people who thought they were going to break that product, it was a daily basis. And it's that same idea, though, that translates here in virtual hybrid spaces. You're not going to break these products. Something catastrophic is not going to happen. You're going to have people that are going to make it easy for you to understand and easy for you to use and fun to use.
Yeah, that's such a poignant question. I don't know who asked that, but that's such a poignant question for the topic here, because I always think about the loneliness of being virtual, and not so much being lonely because you're at your home and you're still part of a team, right? You're still working, but it's extremely isolated, meaning that you do feel this pressure on your shoulders that I've got to learn this, and all the resources that I got to get are actually through this product. So how do I learn Zoom? I actually have to get into Zoom to learn how to use Zoom. It's completely crazy that that was the case a year ago, and now we're here.
Yeah.
And so yes, huge challenge. But if you can start with a basis, if you can start thinking about your faculty who didn't want to get on Zoom, who didn't want to use it, but now are thriving on it. The first day they only needed to know 3 of the buttons. Now they know all the buttons. You do see growth over time when you use it. And the thing when we talk about community is, if that is the key, if you can put them in some place, like a group of them to do learning sessions like you would used to do in person, that's how they can actually grow with each other more than anything. We do a lot of onboarding ourselves, and we talk to everybody, but there's nothing as valuable when they're teaching each other. When they're champions of champions teaching each other, that's really the key. But there are a lot of technology out there that is very tough to use. There's stuff that we can't even figure out, that we don't even want to touch. So it's also really important that your voice is heard in those decisions. And if they're not, make sure it's heard, so that your decision makers are not buying things with or without your consent that you can't use. That's super important these days as well.
The other question is, how do we see aspects of gamification coming into these events?
You go first, Matt.
So I think it's an important thing. I think, I'm always of a mindset, and it might sound cliche, like learning should be fun in a lot of ways. And a lot of this is learning. And it's not so much of I'm getting graded or I'm joining something. It's, I'm coming to learn about the institution, or I'm an alum and I'm trying to learn more about what's going on currently, or helping, other current students with something. I think one key thing with recruitment would be swag. I mean, that's an easy way to bring gamification into here. You can easily have things like, you join X amount of sessions and you get this type of swag, or you get this sort of incentive when you come on campus or you come in the fall. We see little things that some schools are doing currently. Join the admitted student event, join X amount of sessions, and be able to register for classes early. That's one of those really free incentives for the school that is gamified in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we're all creative souls. And with gamification, you can go all over. And I think everyone knows what that means, right? Flagging, badging, giving points, all the different things to basically separate people, make it somewhat competitive to get to a call to action or something else. So in one part of it, we're all creative. And I think that really has to come out more, that we think creatively about how, like going back to event design, how are we using gamification to accomplish those outcomes and goals we're looking for when we design those events, right? The second part of it is how far higher ed has come. And it hasn't been many years now that we're thinking about prospect scoring. We're thinking about, if we do, like we used to do alumni events, and you do like a game watch. You watch a game and you have hundreds of people come that you might or might not know. And then they all come in, they might sign a sheet to enter a sweepstakes, and then they leave. Cool. That was it. No big deal. But now it's, no. We want to capture everybody. And we want to know who is the most likely to bring new members, new paying members, who's the one that's most likely to be a vocal, who's most likely to serve on the local board, We need to know that, and gamification gets you there. Gamification will allow you to pull out those prospects, those masters, those champions, those superstars, to basically use them in different ways. And if it's something as simple as, hey, these are the prospects I need to go after, or other ways is, hey, I need to talk to them because they might bring something really valuable to our team in terms of their insights or their connections or their network. I remember the day in New York, I was on the alumni board and we met this person and they just showed up. Nobody was talking to them. I go up and introduce myself and they know everybody in the city. They know everybody. And through that one person, we got like 50 more people to join the next event. And that's huge. So if you put gamification in the right way and you can pull up those people in these virtual and hybrid environments, it's everything. It's everything. And we even are solely focused on that as well. Gamification will be part of us in some way in the future. But we need to understand it's not just who are those audiences, but who are the people within those audiences that really need to stand out.
I would just add I have a couple minutes, and I sent out a couple of polls during this. I just want to kind of let everyone know. I think it's really interesting to see where everyone's heads are at right now. So the first question was, what types of events are you planning on running this summer and fall? 78% of you all said hybrid events is what's at your top of mind and what you're planning on running this summer and fall. Question on virtual events. What is your top concern regarding virtual events? A year later, 67% of your top concern is show up rates. How are you getting people to still show up to your virtual events? And that's something that we are very cognizant of and we spend a lot of time thinking about as a team. And then the final question really pointed to what James talked about. What is your top concern regarding hybrid events? 62% said difficulty to execute, and 46%, the next highest, said different experiences for the attendees. So if you're showing up virtually or in person, those are real legitimate concerns that I know our team thinks a lot about in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. I want to thank you guys for engaging with us today, joining this, first of all, and answering the poll questions and the Q&A. It's been awesome. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. And like I said, we have another event same time next week. We're going to be going into more use cases and technology aspects of the virtual events and hybrid events and everything. And I encourage you guys to let us know feedback, or if you have any questions, you could email James, Matt, or myself with anything you want to know about. But again, thank you guys all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Matt.